The students have been assigned an essay to complete for homework, and it is writing about space junk. They were assigned this last year as a writing prompt to do, and the feedback from the students this year has been that many of them felt that they didn't do very well on that. So, as practice for us to get ready for our writing, it's beneficial to go back and look at some writing that's been done in the past and figure out how we can correct those errors. So, the first thing that students have been taught to do is when they go into the writing situation, or if they're doing this for homework, they are actually going to get a piece of paper and create a foursquare. And the foursquare is going to have four boxes with a box in the middle. And it's going to be blank at first, and then I will cover as a reminder what the students will put in each of those boxes. Additionally, what the students are going to do is somewhere on their paper, probably on the back, they are going to list out the 10 different steps they need to cover. So they're actually going to be writing these letters down that are going to correspond to steps. It's a mnemonic that they have learned. So the students just recall purple, penguins, find orange, houses in blue, tranquil coves everywhere. And that little sentence reminds them to put these letters down in order. And those letters in order correspond to the steps in the writing process that we don't want to forget. The prompt, the purpose and organization, finding text evidence, making an organizer, making sure we have a hook and opening, introducing the articles, backing up points with evidence, transitions, conclusion, and editing. So the students are going to make sure that they write these down as they're working on this essay at home, and they're going to make sure that they fold an organizer, and they have four boxes with a box in the middle. The next thing that the students are told to do is to look at the very first thing on this list, and it's the prompt. So whether it's on the computer screen or whether it's on a packet of information in their hands, they need to find where the prompt is written. The prompt that they're being asked to write about is write an essay that explains how space debris occurs and the problems that can cause. Be sure to use examples from both texts to support your explanation. Follow the conventions of standard written English. Well, the first thing that we need to do there is try to find out what our purpose and our organization is. What is this prompt asking me to do? I need to explain how it occurs and problems it can cause. So we've talked about different types of text structure, but this is not problem and solution, even though it says problem here. It's not asking me to state what a problem is and then solutions for that problem. It is asking me how it occurs. So that basically means where it comes from, and that would be the causes. And then the problems it can cause would be the effects of that space junk. So I know that my purpose here is going to be to inform the causes and the effects of space junk. So now that I have found my purpose and organization, I will know more clearly how to put the titles on my organizer. So after I have made my squares, I'm going to understand that this box is reserved for my opening, and it's going to include my hook and my bridge and my thesis. And this box is going to contain an article summary. And this is the paragraph that I'm going to introduce the two articles that I read, the authors that wrote them, and a little bit about each article. This paragraph, I am going to make that it's going to be my causes, and this is going to be my effects. So I've just labeled this how the debris occurs, because that's what the prompt asked me to do, and the problems the debris can cause. So essentially cause and effect, and then I'm going to have my conclusion. So my next step after I have labeled the big parts of the paragraphs on my organizer is to find text evidence. Well, I'm finding text evidence in the text that I'm going to be reading. And so if I know that I'm looking for causes and effects, I can figure out what I want to do with that. If I am on my computer screen, I could highlight some of it and underline some of it. So let's say I wanted to highlight all the causes and I wanted to underline all the effects. But as I read, not only am I going to be using my text to highlight or to underline once and to double underline, but I'm also going to be making little notes on my organizer here. So as I see points that occur, I'm going to put those down here. And I'm also going to write where I'm finding that text evidence. I'm going to just use the initials of the article. So the articles will look like this. And so as I read through, if I find anything that's a cause or effect, then I'm going to go ahead and highlight it or underline it, however I've decided, and then write that information down in my boxes. So the astronauts living and working in the International Space Station were worried. 240 miles above Earth, this space station was on a collision course with a runaway tool. 3 days before, on March 11, 2001, astronaut James Voss had dropped a large vise while he was on a spacewalk. The vise had floated away. Now it was back, looming ahead. Mission Control ordered the astronauts to fire the rockets and move the space station to a higher orbit. The space station avoided a collision, but the vise is still up there, part of a large collection of space junk orbiting the Earth. Well, one thing that I have found here is a cause of space junk. It is caused by things like James Voss dropping a large vise here. And it is also caused by other things that people lose here. It tells me it's part of a large collection. So on my organizer, what I would do with my pencil as I'm writing it out is one of the problems is things astronauts drop. And where I have got that information is in the space junk essay. So all that I'm going to do in my organizer here is just write where I found that. I found it in space junk, and it was in paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. And so when I'm starting to form these into sentences, I can quickly go back and find my information. This also included not only a cause, but also a problem or an effect of this space junk. And the effect is that it can crash into spacecrafts. So here I might want to underline that portion, and here saying that Mission Control told them to fire at it. So I would go back to my organizer, and here I would put one of the problems. And again, I found that in space junk, and it was in paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. And then I go back to my text and I continue reading. And as I read, anytime that I find something that might sound like where this space junk is coming from, I would go down and make another bullet here and put my text evidence. And anytime I read something where I found that it was an effect or a problem, then I would bullet point it here and put my text evidence. Once I have finished finding my text evidence and reading through both of the texts, then I'm really ready to write. As I'm ready to write, my organizer is going to look something like this. I am going to have some bullet points. I'm going to have where I found the information. I do want to make sure that I write my thesis over here, and all I'm doing to create my thesis is, which is my topic for my essay, is I'm taking the prompt and turning it into a declarative sentence. Here it's an imperative sentence that's giving me a command about what to write. But I'm going to use this wording to create my thesis. And each student's thesis might sound a little bit different, but it's going to contain the same elements. So in this case, it might be something like, space junk has interesting origins and can cause problems you may not have thought of. Before I have my thesis, I'm going to make sure that I have a hook and I have a bridge. And I don't necessarily need to write that on my organizer, but I know that I need to include it. So basically, I'm now ready to write. My organizer's complete, and now I need to actually start typing or writing my very first paragraph by doing my hook and my opening. I know that I'm always going to indent each paragraph, so if I'm typing, I do that by hitting the tab key, and if I'm writing on lined paper, then I just simply do that by putting a few finger spaces before I begin writing. So just to cover what the opening needs to be like and what the closing needs to be like, here's an example. In the opening, I have a hook, and that has been explained as something that's really going to catch the reader's attention. So it might be an interesting fact I've read in the articles. The hook could be a personal experience that I tie in. The hook could be sort of adjectives. It could be a question that draws the reader in. I could maybe something in space junk say, a toothbrush floating in space, a glove whizzing by a spacecraft. That sounds very out of the ordinary, and that might really draw a reader's attention in. Otherwise, I could just do something like, here, I knew space contained planets and stars, but I learned today that these are not the only things floating around in space. Those are kind of examples of hooks. Lots of different choices there. Then you'll have a bridge. Sometimes the hook that you create really ties into the thesis well, but sometimes it doesn't. And so the bridge is basically a sentence to connect a hook that you've created to the thesis, so it's not so disjointed. So your opening is really going to be anywhere from 3 to 6 sentences, depending on how many sentences you put in these things. So the closing that we'll get to later, because when we are doing the organizer, we're not listing anything in this box. It's only here to remind us that we need to have a transition and that we need to make sure we have a conclusion. But we're not going to waste time writing stuff out here because we're just going to write it on our paper or type it on our paper instead. So a conclusion is just going to be the restatement of a thesis. So whatever you've put here, which is very specific, you're going to restate that very specific point about what your paper is about. So you just want to use synonyms or a different way to word it. Then you're going to have a general summary. And the general summary is just maybe going back and getting a detail from here and here that you restate in a way to sum everything up. And then at the end, you're going back to this sort of general conclusion and leaving your reader with a final thought. So again, it's kind of like a hook in the beginning where it's very general and drew your attention in, and now it's just leaving you with this final thought. It could be one last summary here, something you may not have thought of, somewhere you could find more information. That's what that part is for. So all the students are going to do at this point is write their hook and their opening. They are going to make sure that that is their first paragraph. And then their second paragraph, they're going to indent, and they're going to introduce the articles. And an introduction of the articles, all that is just saying, this is the article that I read, Space Junk by Tony Helios, and it is about, and then just a little 1 to 2 sentence summary about that text. It's just going to be the main idea and maybe a couple of other points about it. And then they will introduce Space Waste by Laura Modigliani, and then write what that article is about. So as they are writing it, it might sound something like, to begin with, 2 articles discuss space junk. One is Space Junk by Tony Helios, and it is about. And then the other article is Space Waste by Laura Modigliani, and it is about. And that is what paragraph 2 will consist of. After that, they're going to do paragraphs 3 and paragraphs 4. And they know that this topic sentence is how debris occurs, so they're going to have to create that to be the topic, and then all of this is going to turn into sentences with text evidence. And then after they finish this paragraph, they're going to move on to here, again indent, have a transition, as you can see, and then create this into a sentence as their topic, and then they're going to use their information, turn that into sentences with text evidence. And finally, when they have backed up their points with text evidence, they need to check on each paragraph to make sure that they have transitions. And a transition can be words like in the first paragraph, first, for example, to begin with. In paragraphs 3 and 4, it could be second, third, another reason, another example. These are some choices for them. And then finally, the last paragraph, these are some options for the conclusion. So once they made sure that they have their transitions, they will conclude. And again, we've already gone over how to write that conclusion. So it's going to be very similar to an opening, but this time we're just summing up what has already been written to leave our reader with that final thought. And then once we've done that, all we have left to do is edit. And so that means that we need to read our paper back in entirety, make sure that we have things spelled correctly, the best that we can, make sure that we have answered the prompt. So I always encourage students to go back and read the prompt again to make sure that they have answered what was asked of them and they have written about things correctly. So if any more examples are needed, we can kind of send those home. The students in their writing section also have an example of another informational piece about cougars that has been done, and we have practiced in class on other articles that we have read, highlighting the different parts of it. So good luck on completing this, and I feel confident the students are really growing better as writers. And then hopefully when they're finished with this one, they will be able to feel more confident about the prompt that they wrote last year and really know how to, this time, answer it correctly as a cause and effect piece.